Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. The show is My Strategy. We're very happy to be here with you today and really glad you could join us. Our episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we're going to be talking about empathy is a critical soft skill. We're going to talk about empathy. We're going to discover the science behind this interconnectedness, talk about super-empaths and how compassion is good for personal development and also business. My Strategy show continues to grow, and Saturday is the day that we choose to focus on our personal development. But keep in mind that any day is a good day for you to reflect on your personal strategy. Our show now is available on iHeart, iTunes, Player FM, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spreaker, and many other digital platforms. So if you do miss this episode or would like to go to and see any of the others or hear any of the others, you can see them there. You can find me on most social media platforms. My Twitter handle is @HawkinsJohn, and my website is johnmhawkins.com. Twitter's HawkinsJohn, and johnmhawkins.com is the website. And just like anything in life, we need to have a strategy and a plan to help us reach our goals because the best laid plans don't always work. This week I am looking for stories on empathy. Do you have any good examples, perhaps a tip or a trick? If you do, send the email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. And we do have a monthly giveaway that we're doing. It's a little bit different format that we've done in the past. So if you go to either Hawkins John on Twitter or John M. Hawkins, you'll see the ways that you can enter in for that contest. Great prize package. It's got a $100 Visa gift card and also has a copy of my latest book, Coach to Greatness. All right, so empathy is a critical soft skill. Today we're going to be talking about what empathy is and how we can use it. Can someone be a little bit too empathetic? We'll cover a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the science behind empathy. There's some pretty interesting science behind it, and they're starting to do some additional research and understandings into this phenomenon. Are super empaths real? There actually is a percentage of the populations that can't differentiate their own feelings from others. We're going to cover a little bit those super empaths. We're going to talk about why empathy is good for business and also personal development, which is the focus of this show. It can help you with sales, loyalty, referrals, and other things. And then we're going to ultimately help you develop a strategy to be more empathetic. So what is empathy? Empathy is the experience of understanding another person's thoughts, feelings, conditions from his or her own point of view rather than their own. And I'm borrowing this from Psychology Today. It says empathy facilitates pro-social or helping behaviors that come from within rather than being forced so that people behave in a more compassionate manner. And you can see how that would be good for business if you're treating your customers in a compassionate manner. It says, although there may be individual differences in empathy based on genetic differences, research suggests that it is possible to boost the capacity for empathetic understanding. And in recent years, neuroscience have advanced the concept of mirror neurons, which are believed to enhance the capacity to display, read, and mimic emotional signals through facial expressions and other forms of body language. These mirror neurons may help individuals share emotional experiences and become more empathetic towards others. The significance of mirror neurons remains in contention, however. And then also it says here, can you be too empathetic? Unlike sympathy, which means feeling sadness or pity for someone who is undergoing some type of hardship, empathy promotes selfless compassion and action on the behalf of another person or group. This sounds like a positive, ethical, and well-principled practice, but some people believe that having too much empathy can be detrimental to one's well-being and even to the world at large. So is there a problem with being too empathetic? That's what we're exploring today. But why is empathy the most important skill that you might need in business? We've got an article here by Yoram Solomon, and the article is in Inc. magazine. It says, Henry Ford is quoted as having said, "Why is it every time I ask for a pair of hands, they come with a brain attached?" Starting with the Industrial Revolution, technical skills and physical capabilities were the most important for getting a job and to be the best at it. Thinking was left to the few managers. The role of the employees was to execute. However, at the dawn of the 21st century, the importance of soft skills became apparent. School systems began to emphasize the importance of those skills. Critical thinking, communications, collaboration, and creativity are the 4 C's of that educational system, which they focus on. And of all these soft skills, there's one that stands out. In fact, it is the basis for being successful in others. Empathy, and they tell us why. There's actually 10 different reasons why it can help, or showing how it can help you in business. The first one is going to a meeting only if you know the outcome. It explains that if you do your homework and understand the motivation of those other participants and empathize with them, you're going to be in a much stronger position when you go into that meeting. Number 2, negotiations. Empathy allows you to understand the motivations of others and the other side of the negotiating table. Think about that. If you could go in there and understood where the other person was coming from, that would really give you a heads up in negotiation. Design thinking is another one. There's a reason that empathy is the first of the 5 blocks in IDEO's design thinking framework. It's defined as a skill that allows us to understand and share the same feelings that others feel. Effective teamwork. Number 4, the most effective, productive, and creative teamwork is built on the ability to conduct constructive conflict. It's the ability to passionately argue the issues. For that, you must allow yourself to be vulnerable with your teammates, ask stupid questions, provide direct feedback, and also be able to receive it too. Conscious capitalism. Conscious capitalism is based on building businesses that do good. Trusting the positive financial results will be the natural outcome. To fulfill the mission of conscious capitalism, you must first empathize with your customers to identify what's important to them. Raising investments, understanding their backgrounds, investment history, preferences, and other biases can help you empathize with them. What about interviewing for a job? Hiring manager sitting across the table from you during an interview is not hiring as an act of charity. They're hiring based on a need, and too often candidates show up for a job interview focusing on what they can bring to the company based on experience, education, and skills. However, empathizing with the hiring manager, understanding the company's needs, and then showing how your experience, education, and skill address those specific needs can go a long way with regard to your chances for success. Sales. Many sales people focus maniacally on what they offer. They focus on the benefits. But if you could turn that around and understand what your customer is saying and empathize with them, you might stand a better chance. Also helps with customer service and teaching. So I think being empathetic and being able to understand another person from where they're coming from, their feelings, can be seen as something that's incredibly important in business today. And that's what this show is all about. It's really to understand more about empathy, understanding the science behind it, understanding the benefits that we can gain from it by using it in our personal and also our business lives, and then being able to develop a strategy so that we can be more empathetic in certain situations. I think it's important to know that just like any soft skill, it is a skill that we need to develop and use based on the need. It's not something that we always want to use, because if you are too empathetic, it can have other consequences as well. But that's what we're covering today, is really trying to dive in deeper into empathy and come up with some understandings behind how this phenomena is, how it works, why does it work. And there's some pretty fascinating science that we're going to go into with regard to, how this works physiologically and with our own bodies. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about the science behind empathy. You're not going to want to miss this. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, I'm happy to be here with you today, and I hope you are as well. I'm glad you could join us. My strategy episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Right before the break, we were talking about what is empathy. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the science behind empathy. What is it really about? I've got an article here. It talks about by Kim Armstrong. It says the title of the article is "I Feel Your Pain: The Neuroscience of Empathy." It says whether it's watching a friend get a paper cut or staring at a photo of a child refugee, observing someone else's suffering can evoke a deep sense of distress and sadness, almost as if it's happening to us. In the past, this might have been explained simply as empathy, the ability to experience the feelings of others. But over the last 20 years, neuroscientists have been able to pinpoint some of the specific regions of the brain responsible for this sense of interconnectedness. It says 5 scientists discuss the neuroscience behind how we process the feelings of others during an integrative science symposium chaired by APS fellow Peter Winkelman from the University of California. And this was at a conference in Vienna. It says here that when we witness what happens to others, we just don't activate the visual cortex like we thought some decades ago, says Christian Kiezers of the Netherlands Institute for Neuroscience in Amsterdam. We also activate our own actions as if we'd been acting in similar ways. We activate our own emotions and sensations if we feel the same. That's important. So let's read that again. We also activate our own actions as if we'd be acting in similar ways. We activate our own emotions and sensations as if we felt the same way. And through his work at the Social Brain Lab, Kiezers, together with Valerie Gazzola, has found that observing another person's actions, pain, or effect can trigger parts of the same neural networks responsible for executing those actions and experiences, those firsthand feelings. Kiezer's presentation, however, focused on exploring how this system contributes to our psychology. But does this mirror system help us understand what's going on in others? Does it help us read their minds? Can we catch the emotions of others? It says you're exploring whether the motor mirror system helps us understand the inner states of others. And so what they did was they had a study here in which they asked participants to watch the video of a person grasping a toy within a large bin. In one condition, participants determined whether or not the person in the video hesitated before selecting the ball. Using transcranial magnetic stimulation in a combination with fMRI, they showed that interfacing with the mirror system impaired people's ability to detect the levels of confidence of others. Providing evidence on this system indeed contributes to perceiving the inner states of others. Performing fMRI and TMS on other such brain regions further suggests that this motor skill stimulation in the mirror system is then sent onward to more cognitive regions. They said very rapidly we got this unifying notion that when you witness the states of others, you replicate these states in yourself as if you were in their shoes, which is why we call these activities vicarious states. Now, this is really important, especially as it relates to personal development. If there's some sort of physiological reason, this vicarious state, that we can experience by watching others, how do we apply that in business with personal development? I mean, there's really tremendous advancements that we could do with how we interact with other people and how we work with others. And I think this is it's pretty exciting to see that there's a correlation and a science behind what we're trying to do here. It says that studies have suggested that this ability to mentalize the experience of others so vividly can lead us to take pro-social steps to reduce their pain. But Kiezers also wanted to investigate the depth of this emotional contagion, how and to what extent we experience other people's suffering. So then they went through and did a couple of other experiments in different populations. One population was human psychopaths, and the other was rats. I guess they're looking at both ends of the spectrum. They said while witnessing the pain of others is correlated with activity in the insula, which is thought to contribute to self-awareness by integrating sensory information, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which is associated with decision-making and impulse control, the researchers found that psychopaths who passively observed an aggressor's twisting someone's hand existed significantly less activity in their own than their own neurotypical peers. When psychopath individuals were asked to attempt to empathize with the person in the video, however, their brain activity increased to baseline levels. So what they're suggesting here is that the current model of empathy as a one-dimensional scale with empathetic individuals at one end and the psychopaths at the others may be overly simplistic. And they said psychopaths are probably equally high on ability. It's just that they don't recruit this spontaneously, so their propensity is modified. And so what they're saying here is that these findings could lead to more effective interventions for psychopath individuals, as well as future research into people with autism and other spectrum disorders. So the question is, how do we apply this? There actually was a study done where the emotional contagion in animal bodies have allowed researchers to further examine the role of deep brain activity. So what they're doing here is taking a look at various situations and trying to determine scientifically why we act certain ways. Why are we empathetic? And how can we improve this? And by understanding a little bit more about the science behind it and these studies, it's going to give us some better insights into how can we leverage these techniques for our own personal strategy. And if you're in a meeting, if you're working with somebody, if you have the ability to really understand them and be empathetic, that can give you the upper hand in negotiations and also in developing a better working relationship. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about super-empaths. Are they real? We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. The show is called My Strategy. Well, we do have a weekly giveaway, and we're doing a little bit different format this time. So you can still enter. Go to Hawkins John on Twitter, and the pinned tweet is going to tell you how you can enter. And we also, if you go to johnmhawkins.com, the pinned blog post over there will tell you how you can enter. So go there. Got a great prize package. It's a $100 Visa gift card, a copy of my latest book. And I think the contest ends at the end of the month, so you better get there soon. All right, so right before the break, we were talking about the science behind empathy, talked about how that works. And believe me, there is not going to be any test on the science behind empathy. What we wanted to really talk about was just how there is some reasoning behind why and how we can become more empathetic. So it's just really to understand that. In this segment, I want to talk about super-empaths. So we talked about those who aren't as empathetic as they probably could be on one spectrum. And in the previous article, they were talking about psychopaths. Well, but then there can be people who are too empathetic. And so I've got this article here that talks about super-empaths are real, so says science, and this is by Hannah Ewings. It says that new research suggested that 1 to 2% of the populations struggle to differentiate between their own bodily feelings and other people's feelings. So this is interesting because, if you think about it, when you look at any sort of soft skill and personal development, it's always trying to find the balance, trying to figure out, am I empathetic enough? Am I not empathetic? And so in this situation, I want to focus a little bit on those people who are too empathetic, because that can have effects as well. It's all about the balance. It says people who claim to be able to feel the emotion, mental state, or physical state of another person are called empaths. Vice made a documentary about them. They met a few people who said they could do exactly that. The reception to the film was split. Those who believed in empathy and empaths and perhaps thought they were ones themselves, and those who thought it was all a load of nonsense. Obviously, the idea of someone feeling the interiority of another human being sounded a little bit more like David Icke rather than Attenborough, which isn't helped by the fact that science backing for these claims has been thin on the ground. In fact, we don't even know how much about the neurology behind empathy generally. Researchers have basic ideas and are fairly certain about which particular brain regions are involved, but this could be a very new area of study, which it is. However, new research suggests the evidence of empaths. They found here that between 1% and 2% of the populations report experiencing this condition. Dr. Michael Banashee, who's a professor of psychology at Goldsmith, in his postdoctoral research, and also Dr. Natalie Bowling, who spent years looking into empathy and more specifically, mirror touch synesthesia. Synesthesia occurs when normally distinct senses are blurred together. This is interesting, where people can hear colors, see sounds, or taste words. In the case of mirror touch synesthesia, sight and touch overlap to the extent that if synesthete sees someone being touched on the face, they feel it on their own face. Mirror pain synesthesia is far more common and relatable experience. And this is something that I can relate with. You know, if you see somebody scratching, you might feel itchy. If you see somebody yawning, you might start to yawn. So that's this mirror pain synesthesia. And it says Bowling said that around 30% of the population experiences this. But it's mirror touch, that trait of being able to feel the feelings of others, that is rare enough to be an alien concept to 98 to 99% of the population. Banzi ran a study at the Science Museum in London asking passerbys to fill out questionnaires about their own empathy levels and take part in tests, during which they were delivered on a tap on their cheek, while being shown someone else's being tapped on a different side of their face. The idea was that if you have mirror sense synesthesia, you're more likely to believe you're being tapped on both sides of the face. Can you imagine that? Having this mirror touch synesthesia where you're seeing somebody being tapped on one side of the face and they're tapping you on the other, and your sensation is that you're feeling two taps. You know, I mean, this is just the fascination and the spectrum to which, you know, we have things. You have one thing on one side of the spectrum, one thing on the other. And, you know, as I think about this and the implications is when you're in a business and you've got, you know, let's say you've got 100,000 employees in the business or 10 employees in the business. Well, let's do 100,000 because the math isn't going to work out too well with the 10. But if there's, you know, a certain percentage of the population that has this and it's 98, 99%, with 100,000, you're going to have some people in that organization who have the ability, who are super empaths. I mean, there's the probability that it's going to be there. And so how do these people in these organizations work with clients? Are they able to, you know, are they able to be super effective? Are they not? And that's really, you know, got me curious here. It says these people are going to find it really hard to focus on what they're actually feeling, and they're going to get confused and make more errors and be slower to answer about whether they're being touched. What's new about this research is it's not simply relying on self-report empathy, a critique that some of the empaths in the Vice documentary, that their belief is that you call yourself an empath, you must be one. It's so difficult to say that one person's experience is the same as someone else. So we want to compare the people on some sort of task rather than what they describe their own perception of feeling. Interestingly, they found that many people with mirror touch synesthesia didn't even know they had it. The brain is integrating everything, says Bowling. You've got your heartbeat, your stomach, touch receptors, skin and all, and this is all being put together holistically in your brain. We don't think about it. It's all going on in the background. In other words, if you've experienced other people's sensations as your own from within your own body, how would you know? So as I learn more about these empaths and super empaths and the implication, you know, there's so many different repercussions and so many different implications. And it says there could be infinite number of mental, physical, and emotional events as a result of this. It says currently Bowling says people with mirror touch report being overwhelmed a lot of the time. Imagine that. If you're trying to work on your personal development and you've got a situation where you are super empathetic, there are certain sights, sounds, meetings that are going to be difficult for you to process. So we really need to, as we start to assess and understand, where we are in life and what we're trying to do, to really understand physiologically how we're made, and that can help us with regard to our personal development. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about why empathy is good for business and also personal development. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is My Strategy. Really glad to be here with you. These shows are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we're talking about empathy, which is a critical soft skill. Talking about empathy, discovering the science behind this interconnectedness. Just talked about super-empaths in the prior segment and how compassion is good for personal and also business development. So in this segment, I want to talk a little bit about why is empathy good for business and also for personal development. And we talked today quite a bit about a number of different topics. We talked about what empathy was, the science behind it, a little bit about the science behind super-empaths. So we now know that, people are at all different spectrums of empathy. There's people who are very empathetic to the point where they do get people and they have the ability to have an interconnectedness. There's people who are so interconnected that they get confused by other people's pain versus their own. And then you have people on the far end of the spectrum who are the psychopaths in the world, and they don't have the ability to be empathetic at all. I mean, they have the ability based on the science behind it, but there's other things that are blocking their ability to feel others. So I want to talk a little bit about, since this show is all about personal development, why is this good for business? I've got an article here that we're going to be reading from. It's basically 4 reasons why empathy is good for business and how this traditionally soft skill yields hard bottom-line results for organizations big and small. And I think that's important because, there has to be some sort of benefit, from doing or being empathetic. And that's what we're going to be exploring in this segment. It says here that playing to our emotions is the cable news and social media business model. Isn't that true? Especially in today's political world. But what we choose to do with our emotions is up to us. So why not choose empathy? So increase sales, loyalty, and referrals. The empathy mindset enlivens the culture of your entire organizations, from customer service to the accounting department. One industry where empathy clearly counts is the ultra-competitive airline industry. Any company that can make flying more convenient, more pleasant, scores points with perpetually frustrated passengers. By now, you're all familiar with this string of PR blunders from United Airlines demonstrating the failure of empathy at the corporate level. But then you may be less familiar with Ryanair's empathy success after implementing their Always Getting Better program, which many customers' annoyances like hidden charges, unallocated seating, carry-on baggage restrictions. When Ryanair implemented this, they saw a net profit increase from 867 million euro to 1.2 billion. It's pretty good. CEO Larry O'Leary famously remarked, "If I'd only known being nice to customers was going to work so well, I'd have started so many years ago. Who knew being nice could be profitable?" So that's interesting here, right? I mean, if you think about it, in the airline industry, many of us are aware of the various stories that come out on a seemingly weekly or monthly basis with airlines. You do hear about the times when they were not empathetic and the employees followed policy and were absolutely rigid with regard to the policy. Well, when you do that and don't empathize with others, there's other implications, right? I mean, it doesn't look good from a social perspective. We're ultimately reliant on people, other people, to purchase our products, our goods, our services. And if those people don't feel as if they are being treated fairly and equitably, then they're not going to buy from you. They're going to vote with their dollars and they're going to get out. So that's how, having an empathetic mindset in an organization can help. And as you can see here that, this other airline, Ryanair, was able to see an increase in profit, directly impacting the bottom line. Next one is accelerating productivity and innovation. When customers perceive your company as empathetic, you will see a sales increase, but wait, there's more. Employees with strong empathy skills are also more productive and innovative. This means if you want to increase efficiency and expand the number of problems you can solve for customers, you want to hire employees with strong soft skills. It says Google knows this well. Since the company began in 1998, Google focused on hiring only the best computer scientists, software engineers, analysts, and highly skilled STEM professionals. But when it comes to putting together successful teams, it turns out that the soft skills rule. Project Aristotle, released by Google in 2017, showed that the company's most important new ideas came from B teams, comprised of employees exhibiting a wide range of skills, including equality, generosity, competition in this global environment, capitalist economy, etc. And if you've been paying attention, the answer will be obvious. In fact, statistics show that empathy is more important to business success than it ever has been. The next one is expanded engagement and collaboration. So if the best managers and teams express empathy and willingness to act compassionately towards others, it stands to reason that companies with cultures that encourage empathy would attract highly engaged individuals. And that's just what the data shows. Empathetic companies also have better retention and higher morale among employees. It says it makes a lot of sense when you consider what workers value today. Good, high-performing individuals have a lot of employment choices, among other things. The gig economy and access to technology have created opportunities beyond traditional corporate work. So it's time to think beyond traditional corporate benefits. What skilled workers are demanding is a different kind of working experience. They want their voices, their workplace requirements to be heard. That's bad news for companies that aren't considering company culture as they look to future growth. Fortunately, making small, subtle shifts towards improving empathy in a culture can make a huge difference. It says here, small changes can yield big results. All of these business benefits sound great, but none of them are more likely to make a company empathetic. To really make a change, the first step is to want to understand what others are coming from. When you focus on wanting to understand your colleagues, you can cultivate empathy in your own sphere of influence, which can have a big impact on your team, brand, and the world. I also go through some ideas that we can consider as we plan ahead and in terms of creating this more empathetic mindset. Things like Employee of the Month awards do not constitute an empathetic environment. Motivate based on individual needs. Consider ways to flip the golden rule. A lot of research is being done on empathy, a lot of different strategies and tactics that we can use, and we can see that there's definitely some business benefit, at least according to the experts out there. So the question is, what are we going to do with this information? How are we going to use this? And in fact, we're going to talk about that when we come back. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about developing your strategy. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. The show is called My Strategy. Right before the break, we were talking about why empathy is good for business and also personal development, can help with sales, loyalty, referrals, accelerate productivity, and more. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about how we can develop a strategy to learn to be more empathetic. Keep in mind that we've got our monthly giveaway, our November giveaway happening. So if you go to Twitter at Hawkins John, a pinned tweet there will tell you how to enter, or you can go to johnmhawkins.com, and that will also tell you how to enter. And the prize package for the month of November is a $100 Visa gift card and a copy of my latest book, which is Coach to Greatness, which has got about 4.7, 4.5 out of 5 stars. So we'd be happy to get that out to you. All right, in this segment, I want to talk a little bit about developing your strategy and learning to become more empathetic or less empathetic. The reason I say that is we go through a systematic approach. It's a 5-step process where you think about the awareness, what's your vision, what's your goals, what are you trying to achieve. We then assess and analyze, strategize and plan, implement the plan, and then get some support and evaluation. And the reason I say that we might want to be less empathetic is because we learned in today's show that with regard to the empathy and this soft skill, that there's people in all different spectrums of being empathetic. You have people who are at the psychopath level who don't express much empathy and can't see it or feel it. And then you've got people on the other end who are super-empaths. So depending on where you lie in that spectrum, it's really important for us to identify and figure out, do we want to become more empathetic, or perhaps are we too empathetic? So that's something that you're going to have to figure out on your own. What I'm focusing on is really thinking about this from the perspective where 98% of the population is, or 90%, whatever the number is. It says 98, but you never know, right? So I want to talk about how you can become more empathetic. And also, I think it's good for us because when we get into our daily jobs and our daily lives, in some cases we can become hardened and we don't think about others' feelings because we're so used to doing the job. So I got an article here by Andrea Brandt, PhD. She says, learn empathy in just 5 steps. So we're going to be empathetic in 5 steps. She says, your relationship with others determines how much of your happiness and success in life. How you get along with coworkers, bosses, friends, and family. Romantic partners often depends on your social skills. And at the root of good social skills is empathy. Empathy means the ability to understand and share the feelings and experiences of others. In other words, empathy is imagining yourself in someone else's skin, feeling what they feel and see, and from their point of view. She says, as the character in Atticus Finch says in Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. So she says, empathy comes more easily to some, but it's possible to learn it even if you're not the most naturally empathetic person. So she gives us some exercises to do. She says, number 1, think about your significant other or a friend, family member, or coworker. So you've got somebody in mind. I've got somebody in mind. What has their mood been like in recent days? What's going on in this person's life that might come to make them happy, sad, anxious, or angry? And how are you contributing? What could you say or do to improve this person's situation? So she gives us an example. Let's say you're married and your partner has acted anxious and angry lately. They come home from work agitated, and tension between you runs high. Last night at dinner, they ruminated so much about their day at work that they barely spoke to you. And when they did talk, it was to complain about their long commute. The non-empathetic response would be to snap at them, remind them that your commute is longer, and angrily respond when they don't ask about your day. That might feel good to do in the moment, and it might be true, but is that response helpful? Would it make your relationship better? Would it improve your life partner? That's a good point. You know, when you're in a relationship with somebody or a business partner, customer, you know, you kind of let your guard down. And you don't always treat them the same way, especially in a relationship here, as she suggests. And you know, how are you responding to other people's needs? So she says, here's an example of an empathy exercise at work. Okay, so now we're in work. Think about your partner. Think about how your partner has been stressed the last couple of days. Think about what's going on in your partner's life that may leading them to feel stressed. Are they working longer hours? Were they passed over for a promotion? Did a coworker or boss say something that upset them? You may not know the particulars, but if your partner comes home from work anxious or agitated, it's pretty safe to assume that something unpleasant happened at work. Go over the last couple of days and think about how you've contributed to their situation. You may not be the cause of it, but you may be making them feel better or worse. Imagine yourself in the same situations. If you were having a hard time at work, how would it feel if you came home to a partner who snapped at you for complaining about your job? Finally, consider things you could do or say to improve your partner's situation. People show and accept affection in different ways. While you may appreciate little gifts as a sign of love, your partner may appreciate the actions more. Could you make something for dinner that you know they'll enjoy? Think about what you could do to lift their mood. So if we flip this and think about our customers, think about people we work with, and think about when we're in these meetings, what just happened prior to the meeting? What's happening with them at home? What's happening with them with their commute? And when we can start to think about people and those we engage with from that perspective, from their perspective, that's how we really start to develop empathy for them. Because when we understand what they're going through and have a clear understanding of their reality, only when we do that are we really going to be able to be empathetic towards them. And I think that's what we're really trying to think about here is strategically, how can you use empathy in the workplace to help increase your interpersonal communications and ultimately achieve business objectives? You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to put your plan in place. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is My Strategy, and we're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, I'm very happy to be here today and really glad that you could join us. My Strategy episodes are on Saturdays. They're live at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we've been talking about empathy and how critical it is from a soft skills perspective. We've been talking about the science behind it, talked about super-empaths, how compassion is good for personal and also business reasons. And if you've missed this broadcast, fear not. You can go to iHeartRadio and Apple iTunes and listen to this episode or any one of the other episodes. And if you'd like to have something covered on the show, please send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. Or you can give us a call at 844-MY-STRATEGY. That's 844-MY-STRATEGY. Today we've been talking about what is empathy. We've learned that it's the experience of another person's thoughts and feelings from their viewpoint. We've also learned that people can be too empathetic. And we also learned that this could potentially be one of the most important skills that you will ever need. We can use it in so many different ways in regard to our personal interactions, our business interactions, etc. What about the science behind empathy? We learned that scientists are working on discovering how empathy works. They're working on how all of this interconnectedness happens. We learned that by activation of our own emotions and sensations, as if we feel the same, there's these vicarious states where we're witnessing somebody doing something or in a certain state, and we have the ability to sense that, to actually feel that in our own bodies. And this is important because this interconnectedness is what is going to give us the ability to connect with those in our personal sphere of influence, connect with our customers, so that we then have the ability to deliver better results. If you're empathetic with someone and able to help meet their need, understand where they're coming from, you're most likely going to get a mutually agreed upon outcome. We also learned that while you've got people who are one end of the spectrum, which are probably the psychopaths, there's also people on the other end. And these are what we call the super-empaths. And there's actually 1% to 2% of the population who can't differentiate their feelings from the feelings of others. That was where they did a study where they had somebody looking at a subject, and then they saw that subject touch themselves on one cheek, and then they had a scientist touch the person on the other cheek, and the person watching the person being touched on the one-sided cheek and also being touched felt as if both sides of the cheek, both cheeks were being touched. So that is definitely something that's interesting to me, because as we think about empathy and trying to teach people in an organization how to be empathetic, we have to realize that there's various different spectrums of it, and not everybody fits into the same spectrum. So you could be teaching somebody who's a super empath how to be more empathetic, and could that potentially have even more detrimental effects? So that's what I think we need to be thinking about as we're putting together our strategy. And why is it good for business and personal development? Because it can help increase sales, increase loyalty, referrals, accelerate productivity and innovation, and expand engagement and collaboration. And finally, we're talking about, what would our strategy look like? And that's what we need to come up with, is what is the vision of what we're trying to accomplish? How can empathy help or hinder what we're trying to do? And ultimately, put together a plan that we can implement. And it all comes down to breaking those habits and conscious prioritization. You've been listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We'll see you next time.